Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation. I'm Gary Williams. The design industry in golf is flying. If I gave you a list of all the people doing amazing work, I'm going to leave somebody out, so I'm not going to do that. But the guy who's joining me now worked with the guy who got the best work. He really did. 80s, 90s, 2000s. He's still getting great commissions. I'm talking about Tom Fazio. But how about his tree? Beau Welling is a disciple from the Fazio tree. He is now doing his own great work. His thoughts on his evolution, the evolution of design currently, and the things that stimulate him most, all coming up with an Ivy-educated golf course designer right here on Five Clubs.
In this split second, your hands make all the difference. It was time for a grip to help them own the moment. Introducing Reverse Taper, technology to stabilize both hands for a more square putter face at impact. The most important split second in golf. Reverse Taper, only from Golf Pride. Respect the grip.
And with that, we welcome in Beau Welling. Beau, how are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic, Gary. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our discussion.
Well, I am too very much. You've had a wonderful career that is ascending still. You've got some fabulous projects you're working on, but I do want to get your thoughts on some broader issues as well when it comes to the design industry as it stands right now. It's a great time for your business. There's no doubt. You personally and everybody else at large. But let me start with this. Do you remember the first time that a golf hole or a golf course piqued your curiosity?
So I think the sort of origin story, I have memories of playing golf at my local club from a very, very young age. I was very fortunate. My dad, sawed off shafts and gave me little miniature clubs at like age 2 or 3. But I think where the light bulb of golf really, really went off for me was we were very fortunate. We had family friends that were Augusta National members, and we had family friends that were Cypress Point members, which sounds like I'm a Silver Spoon kid, which I'm really not. But I got to visit both those places as a young person, and to see these sort of cathedrals of golf. That's when I feel like my interest really went through the roof, and the fact that they both were designed by Alistair Mackenzie, like the same man had been involved in these two most special golf places that had ever been. That was the first time I even knew that golf design was a thing. So that's sort of an origin moment, but it's really in the answer to your question. The answer to your question probably relates to being at the Greenville Country Club, learning to play golf, from a very young age. But seeing these masterpieces was what's really kind of took me down a different path.
How old were you when you saw Cypress Point for the first time?
I actually saw Cypress before Augusta, so I think I was probably in the 12, age 12, 13 kind of range, and it was I just blown away. How could something be this magnificent? And it was golf, and that was really special.
So then, subsequently after that, you see Augusta National. You're from that part of the world, and Augusta National had a public persona. Then Cypress Point was kind of mythical. You didn't see it much. It was part of the Clambake Rota, but you didn't get a lot of television. So how old were you when you saw Augusta for the first time?
It was probably a couple, 3 years later. With golf clubs in my hand. I think about the same time as Cypress Point, I'd been to the Masters. So the first Masters I went to, I think it was 81. And so I'd seen the golf course, but it was years later before playing, but still as a young person. So I'm getting old now, Gary, though. It's 54 years old. So the time of all this kind of gets jumbled up in my head now. But I distinctly remember seeing, now that I say this all out loud, I think it was seeing Augusta National as a patron, and then a year or so later playing Cypress Point as a player. That's when this whole interest in golf design happened. It was all because of Alistair Mackenzie. And so I went and bought every book that I could find on Alistair Mackenzie. Not necessarily that because I wanted to be a golf course designer. it was just I was kind of a nerdy kid that like loved learning and consuming information, and so that kind of took me down the path and or the initial path, and then and like reading some of his writings, I found it very interesting just that how forward thinking he was in terms of his approach to golf design. And so, this isn't why I ended up being a golf course designer at all. But at the same time, if this moment I'm trying to speak to had not happened, I'm not sure I would have found the way down the path, if that makes sense.
There's so many interesting kind of links in the historical chain to, certain things happening, certain people getting certain jobs, certain things happening in the game of golf, like Bobby Jones, because of his early exit in 29, going over and seeing Cypress Point. But Alistair Mackenzie was not the original person that was intended to be commissioned to do that work. It was Seth Rayner. What would that have looked like if Rayner had done that place?
I think very, very different, very, very different. So, I think the Lord works in mysterious ways. So I think it's all as it should have been. So
those two places, because you spent a lot of years with Tom Fazio, and Tom has had input at Augusta National for many, many years. What are the things that you think are the most common aspects of Cypress and Augusta National from the eye of Alistair Mackenzie?
I think it's like being harmonious with nature. I mean, I think like even where work has happened, like it'd be hard pressed to know that it has happened. And so I think it's like working with the site. I think he was a real master of that. But at the same time, I think the idea of strategic golf, where angles still matter, and I think but at the same time strategic, but not necessarily overly penal. And that, like, surely there's some penal holes at Cypress in particular, but I think it's more that it was working with sight more than anything. So I think it's sort of the strategic test of golf, but I think there's also a recognition that like this is supposed to be fun and enjoyable, and I think that's really neat, and I think that probably helps inform some of the things that I believe. If you, in terms of golf course design, if you go back and read, switching from Alistair Mackenzie to Bobby Jones, if you go back and read some of the writings of Mr. Jones early on, he talks a lot about wanting to reward good shots and not overly penalize poor shots, but allow this opportunity for, a poorly hit first shot can be recovered with sort of a daring, more heroic sort of second shot. And I think that's a really interesting way to think about golf. I mean, like every golf architect in the world says they want to challenge the best players and make it fun and enjoyable for everyone else. But like, how do you do that? And I think this strategy of Mackenzie and this recoverability of Jones that I'm speaking to, like, to me, that's what that is. And so, they're both wonderful, awesome places.
Beau, the design tree to me is, you mentioned about nerding out as a kid. I was similar as well. I love to read. My mom was a literature major, and she encouraged me to read a lot. I read, what O.B. Keeler wrote along with Jones, and then started reading what Alistair Mackenzie wrote, Bernard Darwin, Herb Wind. Who do you think expressed the most eloquence when it came to writing about golf holes? I didn't even mention the name Robert Hunter. You can throw him in there as well. Who do you think was the most skilled at explaining the beauty, the artistry, and the technical aspect of designing golf holes?
That's a really good question. And you may be more versed on some of these writers than I am, but I've spent so much time going through and reading Bobby Jones talk about golf holes. It's hard for me, like even to this day, when I step up and am designing something new, like I feel these echoes of things I've read from him sort of going along in my brain. So it's kind of hard for me to get away from that, which is maybe not what you're asking, but that's sort of what echoes around in my head.
Yeah, Beau, look, Jones was he was a very uncommon man. Was very, very skilled at being able to express himself while also having this quantitative aspect to his mind as well. He was a different kind of thinker. There's no doubt. I go back with Mackenzie. I was lucky enough to get a copy of the Mackenzie Reader, which is a compilation of all of his writings, and I can't recommend that enough to people who want to nerd out on
Yep.
thought and about design. But let me ask you about advocacy and aligning yourself with people. Let me get back to this design tree. Why was it Fazio for you? What was it? Was it a geographic component? He was from that part of the world where you reside yourself, or was it something else?
It was, yeah, sort of, again, I think how not to keep a veil, the Lord works in mysterious ways,
Yes.
but I'm from Greenville, South Carolina. I went to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. So sort of like from, quota from Southern, get a few Southern people here, but I did play on the NCAA powerhouse Brown Bear golf team. When you're from the South and go north to play collegiate golf, that means you're not very good. But Brown's sort of a wacky, weird place, and there's really no requirements. You kind of make up your own path of study. And so I'm debating, do I do something around science or physics, or do I do something around art? Like, that's how coherent I was. And I literally woke up one morning with this epiphany of, well, wait a minute, golf course design is sort of technical and engineering, but artistic and creative. And so, and right across the street from Brown was Rhode Island School of Design, which had a landscape architecture program, and we could take classes there. So I started thinking about that. And then to answer your question, Tom was building a golf course here in Greenville called Thornblade, and my father was on the development team of that project. And so through my father, I contacted Tom Fazio, and he basically had to answer my phone call because I was like a son of a client. And that ultimately led to him saying, "Hey, if you're really that interested, next time you come home, come see me," because at the time his office was in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And so I did, and went and saw him and talked all day. And at the end of the day, he's like, "Well, if you're really that interested, you should come work for us this summer." And I think that was part of his way of just getting me to leave the office that day. But in any event, I ultimately worked for him kind of all throughout college as a summer job, and got to know him and his staff and people, and then ultimately years later went to go work for him full time.
Okay, I'm a huge Providence, Rhode Island fan.
Yep.
I think it's very underrated. You got the organized crime element, you got Federal Hill, you got great food, you got your school on the hill, but you got golf courses that there may not be a long list, but my gosh, the quality and the quirkiness. And Ross was, had certainly a footprint up there from. I worked at a place called Musquamacut for a summer in Watch Hill, Rhode Island, which is got a lot of quirk to it. Did you expose yourself to some places up there?
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I mean, I joke about Brown Golf, but it was an awesome experience to great friendships with great people. But we got to play some really interesting places kind of throughout the Northeast. And so our home course was Agawam Hunt Club, but Providence College was at Wannamoyset, and one of my Brown golf team members was a member at Wannamoyset. So we played over there a good bit. Rhode Island Country Club was a kind of a frequent stop. The real treat was getting to get down to Newport. And so it was really, and we played some of those quirky places that I lose track of some of the names, but that you're referencing. But it's just a great environment for golf. I actually just wrote an article in a USGA journal, and it was have an architect pick a hole, and so I picked the fifth hole at Newport Country Club to kind of talk about. But in my little writing, it dawned on me like how influential Rhode Island has been on my golf game, because my golf professional growing up that taught me the game of golf here in South Carolina was from Point Judith, Rhode Island. And then I ultimately ended up in Rhode Island playing a lot of golf, had these great friendships. And so it's a special place, and I love getting back to Rhode Island. It's a great place. And one of the funny things about this USGA journal thing is that the article right next to my little article on the golf hole, one of my golf teammates named Paul Rogers, who became a golf writer, he had a whole long article about his relationship with his father around the game of golf. And so it was a very poignant and well-written awesome article. But it's so funny that the two of us from little old Brown University golf ended up with two articles side by side, 20 whatever years later, 30 years later, in the journal. So that was pretty cool.
That is very cool. The Fazio influence, I think back to, the period where he was ascending himself. Boy, was he getting the best commissions. It felt like everybody who you looked at the industry at that time, 80s, 90s, and you're going, okay, Tom, God, he's getting all the best work. Did that impact you? Did you notice that, my gosh, my guy, he's getting all the good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I was around, I started working for him full time in 96, I guess.
Yes.
And so he did a lot of incredible projects, had already done a lot of incredible projects, but it really felt like it started ramping up. And, I think he was always, um, a lot of people ask me like, what do I learn from Tom? And it's a whole, multi-hour conversation. But I think one of the things I learned is just, he's extraordinarily client focused. And so he was very interested in like, how do I help my clients achieve their goals and objectives? And so there happened to be, there was just a lot of opportunity at that time. And I think he did good projects, and then his clients would come back and want to do another project with him because he'd done such a good job of helping them achieve whatever it is they were trying to achieve. And I think that then sort of started to spread. And so it was a very exciting time, in terms of for me personally, sort of learning, through all of this of how do you do this and how do you do it at such a high level. And so it was a real fun, exciting time for sure.
Well, it's you talk about that time. We look now at what's going on with all of these destination places, and my gosh, I can't believe they're building a golf course here, and build it and they will come. But if you look back, whether it was Alotian or whether it was Sage Valley or a place like Eagle Point, that was to me, and I get, look, Sandhills was a seminal moment in your industry. There's no doubt about it. But beyond that, Tom was doing these places at a time when not many other people were doing it. I want to ask you back to the point you made about client focused. Was there a general theme that he was hearing from these clients who were building golf clubs, not developments, not country clubs, golf clubs?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the golf club standpoint, the Alotians, the Sage Valleys, I think it was like a real attention to detail and sort of perfection, and creating an experience that was like taking someone into a whole other environment. And so I think we were very keen on that. But at the same time, like you're selling something, you're selling memberships. And so I think his nod towards playability and trying to create an experience that wasn't necessarily overly difficult was a big part of that, a big part of his whole philosophy, which again, he sort of comes out of he would never say this, but he kind of comes out of a Mackenzie philosophy himself. But I think that was a big part of it. It's like success, so we had, Warren Stevens that wanted to have this great place. And so like, how do you make a great place? And so there's greens, tees, and bunkers that goes into that, but then there's other things and the environment that goes into that, and what's actually created on the ground. And so I think that was a big part of his success, was like listening to his client of what they were trying to achieve, and then figuring out how to go help them and achieve it, as opposed to coming in with a preconceived notion of like, it has to be this way. And so if you go back and look at Tom's portfolio, you see a real diversity of styles of golf. You have things that look like Augusta National, you have things that look like Pine Valley, and you have things that look like everything in between. And so I think that speaks to what I'm trying to speak to, is this focus on client and what the client's trying to do.
How do you know when it's the right time for you to break away? And you look at the leaders in your industry like yourself, they all have different timelines, and biologically you're all, at different ages. You're not that, you're a little bit younger than Gil Hance is. You're obviously considerably younger than Ben and Bill are. And I can go down the line. Same with Doak as well, who's older than you. How did you know it was the right time to put your shingle out?
I probably didn't know it was the right time. And I was sort of wrestling with it. I'd gotten involved in golf course design because I was a golfer, and so the sort of greens, tees, bunkers, the test of the game, like that's what attracted me to it. But I think working with Tom, a kind of light bulb went off that the projects that I really were enjoying the most were so much more than that. Like they either were one of these special places that you just referenced, trying to build awesome national golf clubs, or they could be like even a real estate development, but trying to create a community and this sort of idea of sense of place and this bringing people together. And I started to realize that the golf is this incredible fosterer of human moments, of like, it really brought people together. And I, think about, it dawned on me that half my friendships were people I grew up playing golf with, or, half my memories of my father, like on the golf course. And so I started to get pretty passionate about looking at golf in a much bigger sort of lens of like, how does this all come together? It was increasingly, opportunities were coming our way where people wanted to talk to me or us early in the development project, but like the golf routing part or the golf part was almost a small subset of like this bigger thing. And so I started to want to try to figure out a way to monetize that for the firm in some way, shape, or form. And Tom was never really into that because it wasn't. I know he doesn't super care about money, so like I know that just felt like I think he felt like that felt like complication. So at some point, I just started to want to kind of it dawned on me that maybe it was time for me to think about doing something on my own and kind of doing it in a little bit different way. And so, but I went to him. I mean, he was like a father figure to me. And so I went to him and like I laid it all out. Like this is what I'm thinking about doing. And like he sat there and brainstormed and spitballed with me. And ultimately he was like, the mother bird helping the baby bird kind of get out of the nest. And so I left after being with him for 10 years. And I think some people always want to make it into like, oh, is it some big reason you split or whatever? And I always remind people that the first 4 months of Beau Welling Design's existence, like it officed in Tom Fazio's office. And so like he was extraordinarily supportive of helping me to kind of make this leap and start. And so that was 2007. And so I felt like I was a genius for about 12 months, because I had all this business coming my way, this, that, and the other. And then all of a sudden, come 2008, like the world started to disintegrate. And I remember thinking, what in the world have I done? Like, this is just nuts. But this different look of a firm that I'm trying to speak to is when I started, we staffed up with landscape architects and planners and even engineers. And it was really trying to look at a project from a more holistic level of like this community building level, using golf to do that. And so when we actually ultimately came out of the recession, that part of our business was really what came back first, is like planning things, even before like traditional golf design sort of came back. And so I think it's behooved me very well. And you fast forward into today and look at what we're doing, like traditional golf design is still 2/3 of what we do, but the other third is really more big picture and planning of like what happens around golf, whether that be a golf function like a tournament, or whether it be real estate development or resort development or what have you. And so I think, looking at like a PGA Frisco, since you referenced Gil, Gil did one golf course, we did the other golf course, but we served as the planners for the whole thing. And so, which is a 500-room Omni Hotel, PGA of America's headquarters, North Texas PGA's headquarters, a bunch of golf oriented retail, like all this stuff. And so that to me is a big part of what I'm passionate about, is what happens in totality. And so sometimes we plug into a project just with traditional golf design, like Gil or Tom, but other times we're involved in sort of a bigger sort of look. And so that, I think that's a culmination of being a nerd growing up and like learning all this stuff and observing all this stuff. I've lived in Europe twice. And so the idea of public space and how people come together is something that's important, to me. And if you go to PGA Frisco, it has a lot of almost urban type environment of like within a golf resort, and you got people clashing into each other, at restaurants, at putting greens, and playing the golf course, whatever it is. And so, any event, I'm a little long-winded. To answer your question, I didn't know when it was time to leave. Tom helped me figure that out, and it was to do sort of something that was a little bit different. And I think it's behooved me well in the long run. That was a hard decision to make back in 2007.
Well, Beau, Frisco is golf Disneyland, and the world's going to get more exposure as we get closer, and we're starting to see. Obviously, we've already had a senior PGA there. The PGA Professional Championship was there this year. KPMG Women's before the PGA will come there in 27. For people who have not been there, it's got everything. You mentioned the hotel. You've got your golf course, the West Golf Course. Gil's is the East Golf Course. You've got a short course. You've got a PGA section office there. You got the world's largest putting green. It's Disneyland. But when it comes to the collaboration of not only the overall project, but you and Gil doing separate golf courses, you've got the high ground on the property. He's got this massive canvas, which is built for the infrastructure required for a major championship. Do you want to know what he's doing over there? Do you make a point of not wanting to know? How do you handle that?
So there are so many, for our company, there's so many benefits that happened or are happening from PGA Frisco. But one of the ones that I cherish a lot is the relationship that our firm and Gil and Jim's firm created through this process. And so to answer your question, it was an extraordinary high level of collaboration, planning and designing everything. And because Gills Golf Course had this championship requirement, which led to lots of infrastructure type requirements. And so we had to help plan and figure out how that all worked. And so, we went through, 50, 60 different iterations of a master plan, to try to make it all work. And so ultimately, it's a lot of the sites in a floodplain. And so one of the requirements of the PGA of America is they wanted to lift all of Gills golf holes out of the floodplain. And so that ended up being a pretty significant engineering exercise to kind of figure all that out. And so ultimately, there's an incredible amount of fill material that came from the West Course to the East Course. And so, in any event, to answer your question, the collaboration was extreme pre-construction. Once construction started, it's like I would be busy, like working on everything that we had on our plate. And so the two golf courses touch each other in a couple of spots. And so there certainly would have been discussion and collaboration there, but it wasn't like I'm running over to look at what Gil and Jim are doing, and they're not running over to look at what we're doing. But we had formed this bond, very strongly in advance of construction. And I think one of the really fun things is you referenced the short course, which is called the swing. And so we collaborated on that, and that was really fun because it was one of these things that got said early on that we're going to do this together, but nobody really, figured out, like, what does that mean? Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you actually collaborate? And so Jim Wagner, Gil's partner, ultimately said, hey, when we got time to, like, we're getting ready, we had to construct it. It was like, hey, if we're really going to collaborate, then we're really going to collaborate. And so we all got together, walked everything together, spitballed this, that, and the other. But then what Jim sort of figured out that would be fun would be to have, us take 5 holes, Gil take 5 holes, but like we would work with Gil's shaping team, and Gil and Jim would work with our shaping team. So the cross-pollination of collaboration existed all the way down to the bulldozer on the ground kind of level. And so that was something I'd really never done anyway, like that before. And so that was a really fun sort of experience, I think, for all of us.
Beau, they get a lot of restoration, renovation work, and you are getting that as well. What is the primary stimulus that you get from renovation, restoration compared to original design?
They're really different sort of animals in many ways. They have different types of constraints, and I enjoy them both, to be honest with you. But it's almost like solving two very different type puzzles. So when you have an existing asset, a lot of times that's coming in the form of like a member-owned asset. And so to me, it quickly becomes a sort of multi-stakeholder process, because you got all these members all have different opinions about what should or shouldn't be done with the existing asset. So we go through a very, engaging process. We sort of run a process where we engage with membership and focus groups and all this kind of stuff. And it all starts with developing goals and objectives, and then ultimately iterating plans and things, and doing an analysis about the goals and objectives and how can we help solve. And so sometimes that, we just did like one for Atlanta Country Club, and Atlanta Country Club is where the PGA Tour event used to be way back when. And so they have a lot of memories of championship golf that they very much want to preserve certain things or restore certain things. And that kind of came out of the process. And but at the same time, they had 2 or 3 holes that they didn't super care for. So it was like, hey, let's tweak and preserve, the majority of these holes, but upgrade all the infrastructure to have world-class turf conditions. But let's really fix these 2 or 3 holes we don't really care for. So that's on one end of the spectrum. And then we're in the process of completing something closer to you on Lake Norman, a place called the Peninsula Club. And we went through the process there, and they were very much like, we want, the best golf course that we can have. And we don't super care about, some of the existing situations and whatnot. So all the corridors are fixed. It's through a real estate development, but like it's going to come out very much feeling like a new golf course. Whereas Atlanta Country Club is very much going to feel like, or does feel like an enhanced of the existing golf course.
Do you think that what we're seeing with not only people calling this the new golden age of architecture, but the interest in it? We have golfing societies. We have, people who collaborate on playing special places and sharing thoughts. And we have, outfits, whether it's, Andy Johnson and all the work that they do at Fried Egg, or the guys at No Laying Up, and the way that we're seeing drone footage. Is that a natural byproduct of just evolution, or is something else going on?
I think it's partly an evolution of us as a species a little bit. I think there's still a big COVID effect in all this stuff as well. So I think if you go look at COVID effect for a second, if you go peel back the data, which again, I'm a nerd data guy, but you had 3 million people play golf for the first time ever in 2020 in the height of COVID, when half the golf courses in the country were locked down, you couldn't play. So like, where did those people come from? And obviously everybody had time on their hands, but if you actually go look at those 3 million people, it's a lot of young people that had been exposed to golf through things like Topgolf, but had never set foot on a greenfield golf course. All of a sudden they found golf. At the same time, the lapsed golfer really came back. So the rounds also went way up. And so the lapsed golfer was a huge part of that. And that would be somebody that, it happens all the time to me. I run into somebody and they'll say, hey, I grew up playing golf. I loved it. Ultimately life kind of got in the way, busy, stopped playing, started playing again during COVID. And now I'm back playing 2 or 3 times a week. Can't believe I missed it. And so all of that I think has been positive for golf and also sticky for golf. But then you take into effect that I feel like the work environment post-COVID is much more loose. Like you have people now not working all the time. We can do calls like this remotely, and so I think it's created a free time in people's system, people's life. And so I think recreation in general like benefits from that. So you have time now to go play golf that maybe you didn't before, or you have time to take that trip to one of these places that you didn't before. And then you layer in the evolution of just media and content, and you're able to see people talk about these golf courses that might even just seem totally aspirational, and might have just been going back to who was the great writer of golf holes. You had to visualize writing. Now you can see and fly over and have commentary. And so I think the confluence of all of that, coupled with, I think COVID also, I think, made us all realize that we as a species, like, we want to be around other people. And so going back to my whole premise of why did I leave and start on my own, it's this idea of golf as community. And I think that all of this has been this big, huge confluence that's leading to this environment right now where you have people have an extreme interest in golf. And I think golf, the off-course golf effect is super real, meaning the top golf of the world, top golf, pop stroke, whatever, in that it's shown greenfield golf that like there's a more accessible way of presenting golf, and that accessibility, it benefits all. And so I think you have more and more people coming into golf that traditionally maybe didn't. And I think we were all on the greenfield side learning of how do we have spaces and places at golf courses and clubs that are open and feel comfortable for everyone. And so I like so many of our private clubs, for example, are we're rebuilding driving ranges, and they're all wanting like some sort of food and beverage hangout sort of spot on the driving range, where you never would have had that before. And so I think it's just a long-winded answer. Just lots and lots of things are going on, but I think it's all sort of coalescing into this incredible interest in golf. And the other stat I like to throw out is that, peeling back data, if you go look at juniors, if you look at girls are about 2x participation rate than what they were 20 years ago, and non-Caucasians are about 5.5x. And so, all that's way greater than the adult population. And so I think the golf's got a pretty good runway ahead of it in terms of interest, because it's just, I think more and more people, kind of getting into it. I think I'll shut up after this one, but I like what Seth Law says, PGA of America head is, I need to steal it better, but he says something like, I think it's probably a good thing if we start looking more like the rest of the world. At the same time, maybe we have the ability to impact the rest of the world. And I think that's really, really, really powerful message that everybody in golf really should think hard about.
I agree that there is the access points are more plentiful now, but we also have this proliferation of a lot of really high-end stuff, which is great. But I just wonder, whether it's West Coast, East Coast, Martin County, it's not near the ocean. These things that are going on in the state of Florida, the state of Texas, that we are seeing with initiation fees, $500, $600, $750,000. Are we hurtling in a direction that is not sustainable? Or is there enough cash out there that we can continue to do this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of those places are driven by kind of a wealth effect, but I don't think it's bad. I mean, and I think all this system works together. I mean, so someone learns to play golf at maybe a more accessible thing, becomes successful, and like ultimately they're the next generation of going into the
Yeah.
clubs that you speak. I don't think all of those clubs will last for forever. They're in remote places, and I think the ones that are have truly well-heeled support behind them, have a probably a better likelihood than maybe the ones that are all just aggregating. But I think it's effective how much wealth there is in the system and in the economy, and then coupled with you start looking at population moving around in the country, and so all the really big booming golf markets are, in my opinion, have big influx of new people. And so you look at Dallas, there's new golf courses that are going to happen in Dallas, that you might not have ever thought about. All the stuff in Florida and these remote things that you're talking about, my state, outside of Aiken, South Carolina,
Yes.
like who would have thought that's becoming a golf destination place? And so I think all of that is like everything, like it's not perfectly sustainable, but I think it's all a good thing. And I think it wouldn't happen if you didn't have this wealth effect, you didn't have this sort of people being able to work from afar, or this more relaxed work environment. Like I think all that's proliferating, interest in golf as well as people's desire to move and travel to golf and those kinds of things. So at macro, I think it's all good. And it'll be interesting to see what all happens, but it's a good thing. More golf to me is a good thing.
You are, you mentioned your home state of South Carolina, and yes, there's a lot going on in the greater Aiken area. You've got a project that is associated with one of the great brands, retail golf and resort brands in the world, and that is Kiowa. One of my favorite roads is Beau Road, Beau, because I know if I'm on that road, life ain't bad. Give us a little update on adding a third golf course to one of the great memberships you could have in terms of the assets available to that membership, but it's not on inside the gate of Kiowa. Give us a little thumbnail on that project.
Sure, it's called Orange Hill, and which is the historic name of the land, and it is abuts Bohicket Road. The entrance is going to actually be off of River Road, but the main entrance at least. But it's an awesome piece of ground, incredible amount of live oak trees, and it's going to be different. So it's a part of the Kiowa Island Club, which is the private part of Kiowa. And so the two golf courses that are part of the club right now are the River course and then Cacique. So Tom Fazio, Tom Watson. And the River course is on Kiowa Island. Cacique is actually right before the gates, and then this is further sort of inland on Johns Island. But it'll be the third course of this private club, and it's a perfect example of what I'm trying to speak to. So, Kiowa, the usage of Kiowa has changed radically since COVID. So you had people, say, from the Northeast that used to come down for 8 weeks a year. They're now living there 8 months a year, and so because they can work remotely, it's kind of what I'm trying to speak to. And so now the club has compaction issues with rounds of number of tee times available, rounds of golf, dinner reservations, et cetera. So South Street Partners, the owners, want this golf course as soon as we can get it, and so we're working through the permit process right now. And I'm just super excited. I grew up, family had a place at Kiowa, so lots of great memories being there, including a Christmas Eve crash on Bohicket Road where I nearly died. Right next to the site, so this also feels like this weirdly faded thing. So yeah, I'm super excited. It's Cacique and the River course, both abut, open water and marsh and, very scenic sites. The site feels very more inland, and with these, big, huge trees, I think the golf that we'll design there will be, very reminiscent of an old style golf, like not moving a lot of earth because we have these trees. And so I think we'll have to sort of ramp up the golf architecture in sort of the old sense of like these very localized things, creations of greens, tees, odd landforms. And so I think at the end of the day, while we're not going to copy anything, but you referenced Seth Rayner, and so there are two fabulous Rayner experiences in Charleston, the Country Club of Charleston and Yeamans Hall, and so I think we'll riff on that a little bit. I think we'll do it in our own style way. Like not going to go do a whole bunch of template holes, but we might have things that'll be like, where did this come from? And I think people will find their path back to that sort of era of golf. I think it'll very much look like that, and I'm super excited. I think it'll be a wonderful complement to what exists in the club right now with the River Course and Cacique. So just ready to get that permit process over with.
I bet. Beau, you mentioned South Street, and not only the Key Island Club, Palmetto Bluff, the Cliffs, close to where you reside, and then you think about the Kaiser family and what they're doing, and certainly Ben and the Cabot properties. Do you feel like, and again, these are different models. I'm not suggesting what the Kaisers are doing, which is high-end retail golf, go there, stay there. Whereas, with you guys, it's memberships, potential residential around it, whether it's Palmetto Bluff, whether it's Key Island, the Cliffs. But do you think that in the large, grander scheme, that the industry is in good hands with these people?
I do. I mean, I think we've got a lot of, bright people that are developing golf, and they're doing it in a way that, like I said, the Kaiser's like very much on brand of like what the brand that they created, and I think there's something about that is appealing. In taking their customers, if you will, their stakeholders, into different environments, or what Ben's doing with Cabot stuff. I mean, it's like, we've got all these Cabot golf courses popping up in all these different places. And I think that'd be awesome because you're going to have this incredible golf experience when you get there, but you get to experience a different environment and a different feel. And I think that's really, really, really cool. And, on the South Street side, you've got, super, super smart, people, capital, people that really know what they're doing. They're obviously, making returns and, for investors and whatnot, but I think they're doing it in such a high level way. In a way, it's almost the same thing I'm talking about. Like, if you go to a South Street invested property, like, it's going to be a certain level and a certain expectations are going to be met. And so to have in some ways, I always think that we on the building side have it the easiest, is like building all this stuff. I think where the rubber really meets the road is operating all this stuff, and
Yes.
and having the experience that when you come there, you get to experience this great asset. But like, you can have the greatest asset in the world, but if you don't have the right operation, like, you're not going to have a good experience. The way I always talk about it is a restaurant. Like, go hire the best chef, have the best ingredients in the world, have the best maitre d', and then you have don't have a good waiter, and it's like the whole experience breaks down. Doesn't matter how good the food is. Like, the experience of, it's more than just the food. It's the experience of everything is a big part of it. And so I think all these ones you've referenced, they all have leaned in heavily on the operational side and really deliver fantastic experience for people.
Beau, one of the essential things about life is we all want a good job. In your industry, how does it work? How does Beau Welling Design market itself in a space that we know who the top dogs are? How does it work?
I've never really been into sort of marketing per se. I think I probably have that Tom Fazio in my DNA of do a good job, help your client, that leads to the next job, and that doing a good job is almost more important than even getting paid, because if you do a good job, then that leads to more. Whereas if you do, I don't have a good client experience, but you make some money, like, then that's pretty short term. So Tom is an extraordinary long term thinker, and I think that's another thing that I really got for him. So it's always been about doing what's right for the client and doing our best. And I think but the interesting dynamic that has happened for us is that it used to be that I would know almost exactly how a new client got to us. They were either somebody I already knew, or like it was one step away. It was like they knew somebody that we knew. But now, sort of post PJ Frisco, I feel like we're getting inquiries from people that I can't figure out how they got to us. And so that's sort of an interesting dynamic. It's, on one hand, it's awesome, but on the other hand, it's like, it's kind of make us kind of think through a little bit different process too, of like, it's just something we want to do or don't want to do. And I think that the easy part to that question is like, oh, of course you want to work on whatever's the best, but I'm super passionate about this idea of golf as community. And so I've sort of got to the point where if we feel like we can be impactful on an opportunity, like, that's kind of what I get excited about. And it can't just be always for, wealthy clubs, because then you're only going to work for wealthy, the wealthiest of people. And so we've done a couple of projects that are, not these big, huge, blow up and spend $20 million projects. We've done a couple of those recently that I'm as proud of as anything we've ever done. And the two that come to mind was we did a big project for Evansville Country Club in Evansville, Indiana, that helped them solve a driving range problem, and we fixed some other stuff. And they're as excited about their version of a new club, and some of the spaces from our planning side that we unlocked. Add parking, add pickleball, add tennis, all this stuff. And then we also did one more closer to home for a place called Coosa Country Club in Rome, Georgia, which we had gotten involved with 12, 13 years ago. And then sort of the plan kind of went away. Well, they reemerged last year, and they had an interesting situation in that how they funded what they were able to do is they literally passed the hat around the membership. And so you had some people giving, $1,000, you had some people giving $50,000, and you probably have people giving $50. But they were able to raise a little bit of money, and we ended up redoing their greens and bunkers and helping them with a new bridge. And again, there's ecstatic as everything. It's neither of these places are probably have golf writers beating down their door to sort of see what has happened. But I'm as proud of those two projects as anything we've done, because I think it's going to make for this better experience for everybody in these clubs for a really long time. And that's what's become very important to me, more so than the flashiest of big name projects. And so anyway, I'm long-winded again, not to answer your question. We don't do any overt marketing. I think it's just trying to do a good job. And we're happy to talk to people such as yourselves about what we think and what we believe. And I think all that sort of begets into opportunities for us these days.
I think that's the simplest way of putting it. Good work begets good work and good opportunity. And you've certainly got that. Before I let you go, you mentioned at the beginning about this challenge and balance and opportunity that comes with how do we make it enjoyable for people who play every day, the mere mortal, which is the overwhelming majority of people who pursue this, and then the aliens who play it at the highest level, as we just saw at the PGA Championship, and the winner just shot 21 under par, 263. What is Major Championship Golf's biggest challenge with respect to whether it's setup, whether it's design? And there were extenuating circumstances. The golf course was wet, so on and so forth. What is the biggest challenge for championship golf and setups now?
Well, I think there's kind of two things that pop into my head. So, one, championship golf has become a spectacle unto itself, like the event itself. And so the physical requirements of putting on an event have really changed in the course of my career. And so you need space in order to be able to service what a modern championship golf course looks like. So I think that, to me, it starts to change how you go look at potential hosts and this, that, and the other. But in terms of the real question of the game, obviously length is prodigious, and that doesn't seem to be abetting, even though there's all talking of a golf ball to me is not. It's like it's not a thing. I know no one in golf design is like building shorter golf courses because I think of the rollbacks coming. So that to me is not changing, and so you get into a situation with their length, and then it becomes soft, it's wet. Then it's now it's darts. So golf that doesn't, the golf that I like is golf that looks like chess. Like, be strategic about where you place a golf ball. When it gets wet or soft, then golf is like darts. And these are really good darts people, And so, to me, you need to, ideally, to me, championship golf. I don't think the link is going to be put back into the bottle. Like, that genie's not going back to the bottle. So to me, if you want to test the best people, you got to put them in environments where the conditions are very, very firm, whether that's naturally or you have the ability to manipulate firmness, which relates to infrastructure and how you build golf, or you got to put them where weather and wind and these things become a challenge. We used to have things called bunkers that were like a hazard, but like now today, we've created this expectation that like you get good lies in a bunker. If you get a bad lie in a bunker, that's somehow negative on the course setup. And so like that feels like a little bit, a thing too. It's like, how do you test some people? If you're not even gonna have what's supposed to be a hazard, what is it? And so to me, it's you got to get firm or put them in the wind and create some uncertainty of like what's going to happen after the ball lands. And so long as they know what's going to happen when the ball lands, it becomes darts. So.
If people are watching on our YouTube channel, they can see in your backdrop World Curling. You have a connection to it. The curling environment is very homogenous, whereas you look at it and everything looks the same. And golf is the opposite of that. When you get out on the golf, what drew you to that discipline?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'm from South Carolina, so it's not like curling, hotbed of curling.
I know it isn't.
But I got fascinated watching on television at the Salt Lake Winter Olympics, and I thought it was like the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And I go into the Fazio office, and one of Tom's longtime guys, a guy named Andy Banfield, and he had grown up in Northern Ontario, Canada, and later in Connecticut. So he'd grown up curling, and so he explained to me what I was watching. And the more I watched during the Salt Lake games, the more fascinated I got, because I think it's a very strategic game, which again, that's sort of how I am oriented. And then it is an ancient Scottish game. So curling and golf both started in Scotland about the same time. And to this day, it's very obvious that both are come out of that sort of Scottish ether, because angles are important. They're camaraderie based, they're values based. You call your own fouls in both sports, and arguably both are excuses to have a nip of scotch. But and then I did ultimately end up with a degree in physics. So like the science of curling is also very interesting. And so the story is long. It's sort of like I became like the Forrest Gump of curling. And so ultimately got elected in 2022. I'm now the president of World Curling. So we're the folks that deliver curling for, we're the IOC partner to deliver curling for the Olympics. So we're like the RNA of curling. And so, so that's been quite the sort of crazy story. But I think what's been interesting, and I started a curling club here in South Carolina, and it was interesting every time I got a golfer on the ice for the first time, they would pick up curling radically faster than a non-golfer. And I think it's a little bit like putting. It's like team putting. So it's called curling because the rock will curve or curl as it goes down the sheet of ice. And so while it may look to you like homogeneous on the television, every curling ice is very different from facility to facility, and it even changes during a game. And so the reading of the ice becomes a big part of what you're doing. Where it differs from golf is that you have teammates with brooms that can go do something that, affects that putt going towards the hole. You can change the trajectory of the putt. But it's been a wonderful, great experience. And, it's this going back to my theme of community and bringing people together. Curling is very much that. It is an extraordinarily social game that brings people together, whether it be at a local club or nationally or internationally. And I've said many times before that if the world had more curlers, I think the world would be a better place. And I actually think the same thing about golf. And I think as we have more golfers, this is the Seth Wall thing. Having more golfers is a good thing. And I'm very passionate about both of these Scottish sports.
Beau, we've got a waiting list at every club in America. Does the South Carolina Curling Club have a waiting list?
We do, actually, because we're ice constrained. So we're trying to figure out how to create a new curling facility here in Greenville that would be dedicated to curling. So you have a dedicated curling facility in Charlotte there, just north of Uptown, and they've done a great job. They've been great friends of the Palmetto Curling Club here in Greenville, and many of our members go up there to play and compete and whatnot. And again, going back to the social thing, like it's people helping each other out and getting to know folks and building relationships. And I think it's really, really good.
Does the Palmetto Curling Club have a logo? Do you guys sell swag? Because I need some. Yeah. Where do you get it?
Yeah, well, I'll get you some. I'll get you some. Just you text me your size.
I will. It's a medium. I am a stocks medium. All right, let me get you out of here with these 5 quick questions. I know you at the end of the workday, you'd like a cold beer. You can have a cold one with any architect historically. Who do you want to settle in with? Who would it be?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be Mackenzie. That's an easy one. Yeah.
Would he drink a pint, or was he a Scotch guy? I got to believe he was a Scotch guy.
That's a good question. I kind of think he probably would too, but I bet we could coax him into a beer.
Yeah, I would imagine so. You are also, as you have mentioned, and I know some of your favorite books, but I want to ask you, is there a book you've read this year that you would highly recommend?
I read that book called Breathe or Breath. it's about breathing. And I tend to be more of a nonfiction reader.
Me too.
And I found it totally fascinating. The short version of it is we've all sort of evolved to all breathing out of our mouths instead of our noses, and it's really bad for you. And so that was very, the nerd in me really found this book super interesting. And in fact, I've actually bought a few copies and shared with other people. It was that interesting to me. So I'd highly recommend that.
Excellent recommendation. I say it to people all the time. When was the last time you consciously breathed? And they're like, what are you talking about? You just answered my question. You haven't. All right. The best burger joint in all your travels, where is it?
Oh, wow. Best burger joint. Oh man, I'm gonna tell you the best burger I think I've ever had. This is not a burger joint, but
Yeah.
that Evansville Country Club that I referenced, that little
Really?
halfway house, and the woman's been working there for forever. And I literally, when we were working on that project, I would go have like 4 burgers for lunch. That's how good they were. I mean, it's like amazing. 2 double cheeseburgers for lunch is unbelievable.
Very nice. All right. The hole you could play over and over again for the rest of your life.
Oh wow. That's a really good question. Over and over again for the rest of my life. I mean, I think oh man. I mean, 13 in Augusta comes up. Would definitely
That'd be a
up
nice
there.
loop. That'd be a nice loop for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Um, God, that's a really good one. There's a hole that Tom did at a place called Wade Hampton Golf Club,
Oh,
also
yeah.
the 13th golf hole, which I think I really, really like that golf hole. It's like downhill tee shot and downhill big second shot, but you're looking right at a glass faced mountain, and that environment's really awesome. And unfortunately, my parents are members there, so I get to play from time to time. And one of the things I really like about that hole is that the variety of it is like it's really a tee-ball driven golf hole. Like you can hit a really great drive and have a short club in your hand, you miss a drive by a little bit, and like all of a sudden you're really scrambling to figure out how to attack this severely sloped back to front green. So I think and it's awesome. It's gorgeous, pretty. So those 2 13s come to my mind.
I tell you, I've only played it once, but the one that is sticking out in my mind is the 5th at Crystal Downs. I'm so smitten with this. The guys I was playing with last summer, I'm like, God, just go ahead. Let me just keep playing this hole over and over again.
Right.
And that's Mackenzie and Perry Maxwell. There's just a lot going on there. All right. Last question. A state that you would love to build a golf course in that you currently are not commissioned to, don't have a project online, and have never done any work in. What state would it be?
It'd probably be Rhode Island. I mean, because of everything we talked about before.
Yes.
And that would be one candidate, and then the other candidate would be Minnesota. So with the curling, I spent a lot of time in Minnesota, and there's some great land and landscapes up there, and I think that would be sort of super interesting. And I've never worked in Minnesota, so.
Beau, I really appreciate the time. I'm thrilled that we got to share this time, and hope you have a wonderful summer. You got a high school graduation today, which is exciting times for the Welling family. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. It was great chatting with you. Good to see you.
Thank you again to Beau Welling for taking the time. A guy who is the president of the World Curling Foundation and also has his own Palmetto Curling Club in the state of South Carolina, from Brown University, and doing some really, really interesting, great work in the design business and golf. Thank you to Beau, but most importantly, thank you to all of you out there for listening and watching this 5 Clubs conversation. We'll see you next time.